Greetings, Credit Union Evangelist here. Glad you're taking the time out to hear how we're spreading the good news about CUs, or in other words, spreading the good news about credit unions. And as I promised, I am sending out content more on a regular basis. And on this occasion, we are looking at the topic, how to be a director on a credit union board. How to be a director on a credit union board. So before we dive into the subject matter, I think it would behoove us if I was to explain pretty much the governance structure. In other words, who is in charge at a credit union, because there are differences between credit unions and banks. And as I previously talked about on a video, there are differences in terms of not-for-profit credit unions, for-profit banks, and then there's some other differences. But one of the stark differences is how a credit union is governed. And when we think of the governance structure, we look at credit unions sort of in a tripartite fashion, similar to how our government, the federal government, or even state and local governments are structured. There are typically three bodies that have governance power and authority, and it also provides sort of a check and balance system so that no particular division has too much authority concentrated within itself. So to start out, there is a board of directors. There is also the executive management team. And then there is a committee called the supervisory committee. And each one of those divisions or bodies of governance has a particular function. So we're going to talk about the board of directors. And if you're interested in being a director, the first thing you need to do is to research the role. Know what directors do in a credit union. Well, one of the first things in terms of directors' responsibility is that the board of directors has the general management of the credit union affairs. They're in charge of ensuring that the credit union is financially stable. They also set and establish policies for the credit union, and they also represent the interests of the members who elect directors. Now, getting back to the overall general management, notice I mentioned general management. So in other words, directors do not participate in the day-to-day operations of the credit unions. That's sort of left to executive management, the C-suite managers and their teams, the middle managers, even on down to the member representatives and tellers. But they have overall general management. And when it comes to the board of directors, the buck stops with them. And therefore, there is a great deal of responsibility and trust. So that's the first thing, if you're interested in being a director, is to research the role, know what the function of a director and what a director does on a credit union board. Now, every credit union has a board of directors. And what I would do is, before you apply, because there will be notices, what I would tell you to do first is attend your annual meetings. Each credit union has an annual meeting where the current board of directors and the management team has to report the financials and present financial statements to the general membership. And there you will get to see who your fellow directors are. You will also get to see who the management team who makes up the management team. So attending an annual meeting is an excellent way of familiarizing yourself with those who are presently directors. And it's an opportunity to meet and to network, uh, so that you then have sort of an idea as to the caliber uh, of the individuals who are making up the board. Then what you need to do is research the role to see if you have the relevant experience. Now, all directors are not necessarily certified public accountants. They're not even all accountants, but there should be some general knowledge of accounting principles, GAAP principles, which are generally accepted accounting principles. You should be able to read a financial statement. You should have an understanding about budgeting. You should know a little about financial planning. You should also have some leadership experience. These are the credentials that are needed, the experiences that are needed to be an effective director on a board. Again, we're not expecting you to be an economist, but you should have some relevant experience for the role. And as I mentioned, everyone's not an accountant. And as a matter of fact, you don't want a monolithic board, but you want directors that can contribute their gifts and talents to the totality of the board so that it could function in an effective way. So there should be a diversity of talent. So that's why it's important for you to know who your your other directors are, who are presently serving, that is, and then kind of get their background, see what they're doing, see whether or not your experience may align with theirs, depending on the SEG group, which is the select employer group of the credit union, because credit unions serve particular groups of people, members, and there may be a certain sector, for instance, that are members. It may be public service. It may be a municipal, state, and federal employees. As a matter of fact, just to sort of backstep, I'm a former board director. Actually, I'm a former chairman of the board of directors for a credit union that was $3 billion in assets in New York City. And there was a diversity of talent, not just with regard to demographics, but in terms of skill set. So that's important for a board to be effective. So you also got to engage with your credit unions. I mentioned you need to build networks. You also need to attend the annual meetings. Then also you have to understand the election process, because directors are elected. They're elected by the membership. So you need to know when the nomination process begins, because credit unions do appoint a nominating committee. It could be members of the board. It's better to have an independent body that forms the committee to do the selection and recommendations for other directors. But sometimes you have the board, and sometimes you even have management that are involved in the nomination process. So you need to know the nominating process. You need to know the when the elections are done. And then you need to participate. You need to, even if you're not running for a director slot, you need to participate in your elections that occur at every annual meeting. Then what's starkly important, integrally important, is knowing that directors are fiduciaries. And what are fiduciaries? They are individuals who are entrusted with the financial assets of another person or another organization. And as a director, you are a fiduciary. It is a position of trust. And because it's a position of trust, and you're in essence managing other people's money, not just your own, but your fellow members' money. There may be other organizations that have money deposited at the credit union, so you're representing a fiduciary on their behalf. So it is important for you to be able to exercise your fiduciary duty with the standards of care. And by law, there are certain duties of care. In other words, the director has to make their decisions with a level of care that ordinarily, and this is typically the standard, a duty of care where the ordinarily prudent person would use in a similar position under similar circumstances. What does that mean? That means you have to do your due diligence. You have to be, in essence, anal about your decision. You have to ask the right questions. You have to make sure that you are being wise in your decision. That's what prudence is, exercising wisdom based on your knowledge of the situation or the circumstance. And if you don't have all the information, then you request it, and don't make a decision or don't vote for a decision until that information is provided to you, because you will be held legally to that standard if you do not exercise the duty of care, even to the extent where you could be found personally liable if you are found to be grossly negligent. In other words, your due diligence was not done. And if you'd have just asked the right question, you would have received the proper answer to it. So not only is there the fiduciary duty of care, there's the fiduciary duty of loyalty. You have to make decisions in the best interests of the credit union and its members, rather than you making decisions based on your own interests or agenda. And you have people that want to become directors because they have their own self-interest in mind. So it's best to make these decisions with the interests of the credit union and the members as the priority. And if there's a conflict of interest where you may be involved in a particular organization or company or transaction, then you need to recuse yourself as a director. Then there's the duty of confidentiality, knowing that what's said in the boardroom stays in the boardroom. Why? Because the information is very sensitive. You're discussing information that is not generally known, and that information must stay in the boardroom. Now, yes, there are minutes, and there are even recordings of the minutes so that the regulators could have access to those as they do their examinations. But 99% of the information that is discussed in the boardrooms stays in the boardroom unless you have regulators looking to examine the minutes. So those are the things, in essence, what you need to do in order to become a director. As a member, you are eligible because you have a right to have a voice in how your credit union governs itself. And that's one of the distinctions between credit unions and banks. In order for you to get a seat on the board of a for-profit bank, typically you have to be a large institutional investor. You have to be a large shareholder to be able to obtain a seat on the board of directors. But when it comes to credit unions, every member is an owner. Each member only has one vote, and therefore you have a right with your one vote to apply to become a director and to share in how your credit union is being run. So what you need to do, again, Go to the annual meetings, find out when the postings for the board of directors and the supervisory committees, when those go out, or make sure you go to your website to find the announcements. Sometimes they're announced on the website in news and in press releases. Sometimes they're posted in your branch, signs about positions that are open for the board of directors and for the supervisory committees. So I hope that was informative on how to become a director, because each member is eligible. But what you need to do is, as I mentioned, to recap, research the role. You also need to see whether or not you have the relevant experience and skills that are aligned with being a director. Doesn't necessarily have to have, you don't necessarily have to have an accounting degree. You don't have to be a CPA, but you need to have an understanding of finances. You need to have an understanding how to read financial statements. You need to know about budgeting. And then you need to develop a network. And you can do that at the annual meetings, and then learn about the election process and how the nominating committee works. All right. Hope that was informative. Who knows? You may take that initiative and decide to be a director on your credit union board so that you can then participate in how your credit union is run. All right. This is Credit Union Evangelist signing off. He is spreading the good news about CUs, or in other words, spreading the good news about credit unions. And until next time, hope you will be doing well, and God bless you. Bye-bye.